Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Erik Nieves. He is the founder and CEO at Plus One Robotics. And we're going to dive into Plus One Robotics, who have just recently crossed their 1 billion pick milestone as well. We're going to talk a little bit about how Erik came to found the company, what they're all about. And we're going to dive into some of the future of warehouse automation, talk about some of that labor shortage challenges and how robotics and automation is addressing that. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of the intersection of AI and robotics too, and why does that matter? And we'll dive into that with Erik today. So, Erik, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Kevin. I've been looking forward to this session.
Oh, good. We got some excitement brewing. So that's a
Yes,
good
sir.
thing here for the podcast. We appreciate that. And it's great to have you on the show here. So why don't we get kind of just an understanding first? Tell us a little bit about Plus One Robotics and tell us how you kind of came to found this company, because you've been in robotics for a long time in your career, right?
That's true. Plus One was born, uh, just from there was this understanding that the warehouse was going to be the next major vertical to adopt industrial robotics at scale.
Mm,
Of course, even today, 7 out of 10 robots sold are building a car part somewhere. Right? It's
yeah.
still very heavily indexed towards automotive and then heavy manufacturing. Uh, but when you sort of just look at the where the labor flows, where is who is struggling to get labor? There's other pockets in the economy. Logistics was one. Uh, Agriculture, of course, is always struggling. Construction, anybody who's trying to build a house understands just how
Yeah.
the lack of labor is there. So it could have been any of those things, but it was clear that the warehouse was not only a huge opportunity for automation, but in a lot of ways it lent itself to the tools available,
Mm,
right? I mean, the others that we're talking about, first thing, they're outside, right? And robots today don't like being out of doors. Warehouse automation obviously is under roof. There's other things that sort of make the technology more accessible to that. And so we knew the opportunity was there. But what was missing, the challenge that was presented me, and this was even when I was still at Yaskawa running R&D,
mm,
was Erik, if the warehouse is such a ripe market for robots, why aren't there 1,000 of them there today?
mm.
And it's because there was a technology gap. And that gap was vision, software, and grasping. It's not a robot arm problem, it's a perception and grasping problem. Um, and, when you make that determination, well, then it's pretty easy to understand that, that's not going to be solved by a robot arm company.
Yeah.
And so Sean and Paul, my co founders, and I joined forces to solve the perception problem for warehouses and to bring those industrial robots into bear. And we've been, successful.
Mm,
It's been, we took our first check of, venture funding back in 2017. So this
okay.
is 7 years in for us.
Yeah.
You mentioned the billion picks. That was what I think February of this year, sometime earlier this year, we crossed
Yeah.
a billion picks, and we'll do over a million picks today um, and every day.
Mm.
So the technology is being well received and adopted out in the market.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a great thing, and I think it's such a good point there, as you mentioned. The hardware, in a sense, kind of has been existing there, but it's kind of that software back end type of thing. As how do we take this hardware and utilize it in that certain way? And obviously, you guys, if you're crossing a billion picks and you're doing a million a day, I think you just mentioned. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, you figured something out there, right? That's working. So I mean, I think it's very interesting, but even as you said, I mean, I think the penetration in the market for robotics and automation is still kind of low if we look in the
Oh
grand
yeah.
scheme of things, right? So talk to us a little bit about kind of that. that future of warehouse automation now? I mean, as we look at it now, I mean, do you think that people are becoming more open to it, and that's going to increase the adoption? I mean, where are we? I guess let's start like where are we currently, and where do you think we're evolving to in the next couple years?
Yeah, spot on. If we're doing a million picks a day, and
Mm,
we know how few robots we have in proportion to the other applications that are ahead
yeah.
of us in the warehouse, we could do 100 million picks a day and still
Mm,
have plenty of headroom, right? That's how early we are in this, sort of emerging vertical. Uh, and what is it that's going to catalyze continued growth here? One is we have to just accept it as ground truth that the warehouse is a reticent adopter of technology, right?
mm,
And it's true because it's also a high intensity domain. You've got to get this stuff shipped and it has to hit this window at this time,
yeah.
or customers are going to be disappointed. So, when you're in that mindset, bringing in a piece of technology that's supposed to solve the problems is a risk. You
Mm,
know you can do it if you have enough labor, right? And I encourage warehouse operators every day. If you can get the labor you need to meet your volumes and your cutoff windows, please do,
mm,
because there is no more flexible, adaptable, resource than people.
mm,
The issue is if you can't. If you
yeah.
can't get those people, then what are you going to do? You're going to have to adopt this technology. Uh, what they want to see is more proof points in the world.
Mm,
Of course, we all do. We
yeah.
want to see that, hey, somebody that looks like me has solved their problems, or addressed some of them by adoption of these new techniques. And when that happens, you sort of catalyze the market. So, our users are all at the top of the market.
Mm,
We focus nearly exclusively on parcel post.
okay.
So it's, FedEx, it's, DHL, it's all the couriers. Anybody that shows up at your porch, bringing your packages for the week is likely a Plus One customer. That's great, but there needs to be enough of them, enough robots doing enough picks for enough time for everybody to say, this is a vetted, proven, reliable technology. And then you're not at a million picks a day. You're at
Mhm.
10 million picks in 6 months. You're at 100 million picks in 2 or 3 years. It just continues to grow much more rapidly when everybody feels they have the proof.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's still definitely, I know, like when I talk to people and operators and stuff, I mean, there's still like a bit of skepticism around that, right? And when are things
Mm-hmm.
going to come about? I'm curious though, because it kind of lends itself. I saw, I think you posted something from a recent talk about, I think it was Stephanie from Pitney Bowes, who we've had on
Mm-hmm.
the podcast before, said to stop being so cautious around the
Right.
pilots basically and things like that. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, do you think people need to maybe like rip the band-aid a little more, so to speak?
They do.
Yeah.
I understand the stakes are high, but
Hmm.
we're getting to the place where there's enough evidence of, success that folks should be in a position to move faster. You're right. Stephanie, who had the best use of onomatopoeia I've ever seen on a panel when she started talking about the drip, drip, drip of pilots, right? Um, she's right. What Pitney Bowes did was get to about 70% confidence,
Hmm.
and then say, okay, do I believe in this team enough that
Hmm.
they'll get us through the other 30%? That's really
Interesting.
the bet.
Yeah.
That's the bet. It's not so much the technology, it's the team behind it. And we'd inspired enough confidence in Pitney Bowes that by the time they got to 70%, they said, let's go. And we have multiple systems at Pitney Bowes across multiple facilities across their network doing meaningful work for them every day. But Pitney is a bit of an outlier when it
Mm.
comes to let's just move and move quickly, right? So, but yes, uh, definitely time to say we're going to take a leap of faith and jump more fulsomely into the technology. But you mentioned this sort of reticence, right? That's part of the reason plus one is plus one, right?
Mm.
Is this whole notion of the most important thing that robot does in the facility is keep running,
Yeah.
right? It's got to be reliable. The uptime is crucial. Uh, and so, Plus One's approach is if you back up to 30,000 feet, what's the difference between manufacturing and logistics?
Mm.
It's manufacturing is all about repeatability, and logistics is all about variability. Every pick, you don't know what's going to come down the line next. So you have to discover everything every time. Hence, it's a perception problem, right? It's a software problem. But as a software problem, our position is there will be occasions when this AI enabled, high end software is going to disappoint you. There will be scenes so cluttered. There will be images so shiny or reflective or packages it's never seen. Who knows what?
Mm.
Variability is going to continue to happen, and sometimes that variability is going to exceed the capacity of the software to understand at that
Mm.
moment. And so when that happens, the robot actually signals back to Texas. And a crew chief, which is what we call the people that sort of manage the robots in the world, they get a ding and they see, oh, look, that robot is confused. Let me help it. And you
Mm.
do that remotely and you do that very quickly. Uh, and all of a sudden, that robot's back to work. That interval, Kevin, from the time it said, I don't know what I'm doing till it's running again,
Yeah.
is always under 10 seconds.
Oh wow.
This is hugely important to our users because it leads to this uptime. It means, hey, yeah, the robot got confused, but the truth is none of us on the floor even knew it happened
Mm.
because it was kickstarted back into production so quickly and we didn't have to intervene physically in the facility.
Mm.
That's the plus
Interesting.
one-ishness of plus one,
Yeah.
is you add this
Plus
human
one is
being.
this. I like that. Yeah.
Right. You add this human being, and all of a sudden you're driving a lot more reliability of the system. Right.
Mm.
Nobody wants a robot boat anchor sitting there taking up room and then have to put a human to work around it.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So the robot, it's the Hippocratic oath that she shall do no harm.
Mm.
Right. We cannot afford to, impact rate or volume. So the robot has to keep running. Um, this approach, this sort of people centric, human centric approach to the automation, right, is much more readily acceptable to a warehouse operator that's looking at how do I make sure that the
Mm.
systems don't, sort of just die on the vine, right?
Yeah.
And, it gives them a great sense of relief because you have narrowed the catastrophe gap in their mind.
Mm.
You not in their mind, you actually have narrowed the catastrophe gap because without that sort of quick human intervention remotely, what do you got left? You got sneaker net. You got
Right.
somebody walk out to the machine, figure out
Yeah.
what's going on. All these robots, the vast majority of them are up on mezzanines. Somebody's got to
Mhm.
climb a ladder, figure out what went wrong, push some buttons, clear some stuff. It it all takes so long.
Mm.
And if that happens, twice an hour and it costs you, 18 minutes of downtime, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Right? You have to be able to intervene quickly and remotely.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great key. And I think it's great that you guys have recognized that and focused on that too to make that user experience even better. I'm curious in your opinion there. I mean, as we I think back when I started this podcast back in 2019, and there was the big discussion about the lights out warehouse, the dark warehouse,
Yeah,
whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, and I think I see that a lot of that conversation has kind of disappeared in a sense, right? So I'm curious your thoughts on that, since you have this focus where you're saying the plus one-ishness, which
yeah,
I like that,
yeah.
with still some of that human intervention involved. So I'm curious, what do you think about that concept or that idea? I mean, is that something that's really realistic even to think about at this point, is having a lights out warehouse?
I don't think it is.
Mm,
It's not that I don't even think it's realistic. It's that I don't think even if it were possible, you should do it.
mm,
You're gonna, you know, you're going to have boxed yourself in so much. You would have paid so much capital to have this, fictitious lights out warehouse.
yeah.
We have folks come to us, Kevin, on occasion with that notion.
Mm,
And it's pretty short conversation because I'm just not a believer in the dark warehouse. I am a human exceptionalist, frankly. You've heard me already say,
mm,
if you can get people,
yeah.
please do, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you mentioned 2019 when you started the podcast. I think that was the year, was it 19 or 2020, that the information
Mm,
named Plus one of the top 50 AI companies in the country,
mm,
right? We're not AI skeptics here. Every single system that we have deployed is running a robust AI model, and one that adapts regularly over time. Um, but even so, we're saying, hey, AI is not going to be sufficient. And
mm,
this is sort of where Plus One diverges from other folks in the market. There's this tension between human exceptionalism, heck, our whole motto is robots work, people rule, right?
yeah.
Um, versus AI first, AI only, right?
Mm,
And it comes down to, how do you view the warehouse? Do you view the warehouse as a systems problem, or do you view it as a data problem,
mm,
right?
yeah.
We're systems people. I would argue that there is nothing in robotics that isn't a systems problem. You
Okay.
have to be very mindful, not just of what the robot is doing, but what is happening upstream of you and how do you interface to what's downstream of you.
Mm,
That's not just data, that's engineering, that's, uptime, reliability, all these other things we talked about. The other view is the warehouse is a data problem. And if we just feed enough images, to the robots and the sensors, the robots will teach themselves how to do the job and we can all go home. The dark warehouse is predicated on this, is based on the warehouse is a data problem,
mm,
but it isn't, and it can't be. So the kind of proof in that pudding is, don't talk to the vendors of this technology, talk to the consumers.
okay.
Ask the warehouse operator, ask somebody on the line, do you have a data problem, or do you think of your stuff as, data, or do you think of it as a system? They're
Mm,
all going to tell you it's a systems problem,
yeah.
right? So, when it's a data problem, you don't have to worry about preventive maintenance.
Mm,
When it's a data problem, you don't care about friction, inertia, heat, any of that,
yeah.
right? The warehouse is not a data problem.
Yeah.
Optimization, network optimization, routing, all the stuff that are ones and zeros, data problems.
Mm,
AI you can have a lights out optimization routine, but you cannot have a lights out warehouse.
mm,
So thou shalt have a
interesting.
human in the loop. That's our
Yeah.
view.
One of the plus one commandments right there, right?
That's it.
Definitely. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I see it challenging to get to that point, even with some of the variability too that you mentioned. I mean, you said that you get a shiny product, and it's how do the robot's like, how do I handle this, right? I mean, so I think it's very interesting to hear that perspective, and I think it's something that's if happening is quite far down the road, I would say,
Yeah.
if anything. I mean, I think, even we talked here about the, the low kind of penetration in the market so far, just around robotics in general. I mean, to get somebody to even like want to do that, or feel comfortable doing that. I mean, I think, us as warehouse operators, we're kind of a little risk adverse. We're a little cautious,
Hmm.
implementation disruption are some of the dirtiest words probably
Hmm.
to the warehouse world. So I think it would be a huge challenge to even get to that point, if it even makes sense at some point to do it, and can be efficient and consistent overall, kind of as you mentioned there. So yeah, very interesting perspective there. So now I'm curious. I mean, from the perspectives we talked about, kind of the future of warehouse automation, and you mentioned that a lot of the Plus One robotic applications are on mezzanines as well, and things of that
Hmm.
nature. I mean, as we look towards the future as well, and people are starting to put robotics or automation into their operational roadmaps and their company roadmaps. And I'm in New Jersey here, and they're building warehouses like crazy around here still
Yeah.
where I'm at. And I mean, as people look to the future of their buildings, the future of their facilities, I mean, how do you advise, or I mean, are you seeing too, I mean, I guess in a sense, where people are building out these warehouses with not necessarily putting automation in right away, but making sure that the building, the facility itself is prepared to be able to have automation at some point?
Yeah. I mean, this is a whole brownfield, greenfield, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I've just seen instances of where you have a brownfield, they want to bring in a piece of automation, and look at the amount of work they got to do to the facility, right?
Hmm.
I mean, if you're going to put in an ASRS,
Oh yeah.
I mean, that all of a sudden the specs that your floor has to hit for flatness, for loading, etc., they end up cutting a big hole out of your floor and starting up again,
Yeah.
building a new foundation, pouring a new pad. Um, I have to believe that as these technologies sort of become the way you do things,
Mm.
that's going to have an influence on warehouse construction. Uh, I mean, it could be just as mundane as power.
Yeah.
You can run a warehouse right now pretty much on single phase and maybe 220 for some motors. Well, guess what? Robots run three-phase power.
Mm.
So there's been a number of instances where we're like, okay, we're going to put this robot here. You got to bring in three-phase. Oh, and we want an Ethernet drop
Yeah.
because these robots all have to be connected. And they're like, oh, we hadn't considered that, and
Mm.
the nearest trunk is way back over there. So it has to be the case that as you if you're going to have these facilities be automated, you're going to have to make some provisions early, for them. Uh, if you were going to have a warehouse full of people, you would make sure there were enough restrooms, drinking fountains, the type of things that
Yeah.
people need. Well, robots don't need those things, but they do need these other things. And so you have to make provision for them, right?
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense because, I mean, robots, they don't need the restroom, obviously. Right.
No, they don't need a
Not yet.
parking
Yeah.
spot either, right?
Yeah, yeah, robot of the month, parking spot, right? But yeah, I mean, I think that makes total sense. I mean, I think as we see the evolution too, I mean, I think even in the developers mindset, or some of these large like Prologis or something, property
Yeah,
management companies, I mean, I think it's going to be even more of a probably an advantage at some point in their eyes to be able to put this type of infrastructure in place ahead of time, right? And have these kind of power requirements already available, because I think it's going to, at some point, it's going to become something that's just like expected, right? Like
yeah,
that's, we're looking for a building, and oh, your building doesn't have this. And I think there's some way to go there, because I've been in buildings too that are new construction, and I'm like, you guys don't even have like power outlets set up at the dock doors. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
what's going on here? And so, I mean, I think you're going to see more of that, and I think it'd be interesting to see kind of that evolution and development of what what a greenfield, type of building looks like and is set up as. And I think it's pretty interesting to hear too. I mean, I hear some buildings where they're going up to 80, 90 foot, 100 foot clear, like for some of these ASRS systems, pallet shuttle
yeah,
systems, and things like that.
right.
It's just kind of mind blowing to think about, honestly.
Being able to deal with that in a greenfield context means the cost is just nominal. It's incremental. It's
Yeah.
lost in the noise. Doing it in a brownfield is just much more intrusive. I mean, just think about the mezzanine,
Oh
right?
yeah.
If you had to, right size the mezzanine for automation, the difference between that mezzanine and a mezzanine that was just human only isn't that much
Yeah.
when you're doing it from the ground up. But if you have to go back and cut and drop legs and other things, all of a sudden it becomes a much more involved piece of work. So yes, I encourage all of these supply chain consultants and the CBREs of the world, et cetera, be thinking about the technologies your tenants are going to be employing
Mm.
and how does that affect the choices you make in the construction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice there. So, very interesting talking to you, Eric, and getting some of these perspectives. Now, tell us a little bit about kind of we talked about Plus One Robotics a little bit here and there, but I know you guys have had some new announcements and things going on. We mentioned the billion picks, but tell us a little bit about kind of what's the newest, latest with
Yeah,
Plus One Robotics, and maybe what's coming in the future as well.
sure. So just last week at the Automate show, we formally introduced our InductOne system.
Okay.
So again, in the parcel space, you can't slow the building down, right? So
Mhm.
it's important that on a high speed sortation loop, whether it's a cross belt sorter or whatever it might be, to get as much rate and first pass yield out of that sorter as possible. So the vast majority of the systems in the world is one robot arm on a lane,
Mm.
right? Well, one robot arm is going to be limited into what its throughput is going to be. So, okay, well, what can we do to make the systems faster? Well, let's make the camera faster. Well, you know what? There's only so many milliseconds you're going to get out of that. Well, let's choose a faster robot. Well, you know what? There's only so many, the robots are only going to get so fast.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what do you got to do? You got to put two of them on there,
Yeah.
right? And so this is a two-armed system
Mm.
that we have introduced, and I'll tell you, it took 7 years because it took all
Mm.
the learnings from that billion picks to build this machine. And InductOne is very well received in the market. Uh, I mean, we say it was formally introduced. That's
Mhm.
true, but a
Yeah.
lot of our customers had direct influence on the sort of design and architecture of this machine. But beautiful machine, comes in. It's configured so that it can be left hand, right hand. What side of the sorter is it on? Up on a mezzanine, on the ground floor, doesn't matter. But the throughput is really, really high.
Mm.
Over 3,000, picks per hour machine rate. Comfortably, over 2,300 picks in variable mix. It's going to be a good machine for this market, and they need that. They're all clamoring for more volume
Yeah.
per hour, right? The cutoff windows aren't going to get any longer. The planes
Yeah.
land and they're going to take off 4 hours later. That's not going to stretch. So you got to get more volume out over the same duration. And this is a good machine to do that. So we're excited about that. Um, and I'll have to tell you, we've been very pleased with the sort of growth and adoption of our depalletizing software.
Mm.
So to us, a pallet isn't really much different than a parcel post project, right? It's all these
Yeah.
different things. They're sitting in a pile, and you got to get them out of the pile. Well, a pallet's just one of those, and so we built our software to do mixed depalletizing. if you've got single SKU pallets, you don't need us. But if it's mixed, then all of a sudden our technology comes to bear. And uh, we've been very successful in our growth over the last 6 quarters on our depalletizing, and more to come. So we'll have, another bunch of systems deployed before peak of this year.
Yeah.
Uh, and so looking for really good things out of depalletizing as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I think because sometimes people would think as the mixed as the complicated part versus the single SKU, right? And you're saying like, don't give me the easy, right? Basically, right?
Well, I mean,
Um,
it's just we're
yeah,
over spec for it. If
yeah,
it's a single SKU, you don't need vision. Just get a
yeah,
really big gripper, suck all of it up, and put it on its, descramble it.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, and layer pickers have been an established technology for a long time.
mm,
But the truth is, the warehouses are getting away from single SKU.
yeah,
Everybody wants to have, fewer shipments, and the pallets being representative of what the store needs.
yeah.
So it's all going to be mixed, and all of a sudden those layer pickers stop adding value.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I think that makes sense, especially as we see the evolution of consumer desire and trying to be more efficient and get more out of less, as they say. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
great that you guys are addressing that and bringing these technologies to the industry and being able to help with that and like you said, help increase that adoption a little more too as we go into the future. So very interesting to talk to you here today, Erik, and very interesting to hear a little bit more about Plus One Robotics and what's going on with the latest with you guys with the dual arm there. And congratulations on a billion picks as well. Maybe the next time we'll talk, we'll be at 2 billion potentially. We'll
Yes,
see.
sir.
But yes, if people want to learn more about Plus One Robotics, what's the best way to do that?
Well, definitely plus1robotics.com. But I would encourage you to your, audience to, find us on LinkedIn. We're very
Yeah.
active on the platform. We have a bunch of opinionated engineers and folks here at Plus One. And so we are all the time talking about, what we see in the market, what we see as, successful things that intrigue us, and just trying to grow the warehouse automation community. Because as you pointed out, yeah, a million picks a day doesn't scratch the surface.
Yeah.
This market is still emerging, and the most important thing we do is educate one another.
Mm,
So, thanks for this podcast because it's part of it.
yeah.
This is a rising tide lifts all boats. It's in our interest that everyone be successful and leverage those successes across, because that's the way that we really make an impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I 100% agree with you. I think, we can only make each other better through awareness and education. And I love that you guys are taking an approach and effort to be able to do that for the industry. So thank you for that. So thank you so much, Erik, for joining me today. And to learn more about Plus One Robotics and find those links that Erik mentioned, head to thenewarehouse.com. And thank you once again for your time today, Erik.
Thanks, Kevin. It was terrific.